London, June 1529. Inside the sweltering halls of Blackfriars, a queen's crown hangs by a single, fraying thread. Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the legendary Isabella, faces a court designed to dismantle her life. Henry VIII, eyes burning with a desperate need for a male heir, demands an annulment. In our timeline, she knelt in a raw, emotional plea, an act of desperate piety. But imagine a Catherine who didn't just weep, but strategized. A woman who traded the role of the martyr for that of the master tactician. In this moment of absolute peril, a subtle shift in her words could have rewritten the fate of empires, sparking a revolution that never was. Before we continue, if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and like, and comment where you're from and where you're watching from. July 1531. The air at Windsor is thick with the scent of lavender and the stench of desperation. King Henry VIII, a man accustomed to crushing obstacles, stands before the woman who has been his wife for over 2 decades. He offers her a choice that is no choice at all, the silence of a nunnery or the public humiliation of a stripped title. In our world, Catherine's defiance was her legacy.
But in this shadow history, she does the unthinkable. She smiles. With a grace that unsettles the king, Catherine accepts the veil. This is not the broken surrender of a discarded woman. It is the opening move of a grandmaster. By retreating to the cloisters of St. Albans, she transforms from a legal hurdle into a living saint. She remains the queen in God's eyes, a title no earthly court can rescind. Anne Boleyn, waiting in the wings with sharpened ambition, finds the stage suddenly empty. There is no trial to win, no villainous wife to overthrow. Catherine has retreated behind the one wall Henry cannot batter down, the sanctity of the church. From her cell, she maintains a correspondence that spans the continent, her letters whispered through the courts of Europe like a holy fever. She has secured Princess Mary's place in the succession by refusing to argue, and she has left Henry with a vacuum where his rage used to be. The strategic retreat is complete. The king is free to marry, yet he is more shackled than ever to a woman who is now beyond his reach. Imagine the great hall at Greenwich.
The air is heavy, not with the scent of victory, but with the cloying aroma of a stalled revolution. Anne Boleyn had prepared for a war of attrition, for a clash of iron wills that would justify her ascent. Instead, she finds herself punching at smoke. By retreating to the quiet sanctity of the convent, Catherine of Aragon has achieved what decades of marriage could not. She has made herself untouchable. Henry VIII, a monarch whose heart was a furnace fueled by the thrill of the chase, now finds the quarry has simply vanished. The fire that once burned for Anne begins to flicker in the drafty corridors of a court that still whispers Catherine's name in its prayers. Without a cruel wife to overthrow, Anne cannot be the liberating queen. She is merely the woman who separated a king from his peace. The descent is not a sudden drop, but a slow, agonizing slide into the margins. Her sharp wit, once a weapon of seduction, now grates against the king's growing guilt. The nobility, seeing the wind change, pull their support. The ambassador's letters become brief, dismissive. There is no trial by jury, no dramatic execution on Tower Green.
In this world, Anne's fate is far more devastating for a woman of her ambition. She is not a martyr to be remembered. She is a nuisance to be managed. As the king's eyes wander toward the next horizon, Anne is left in the chilling silence of a hollowed-out court, a queen of a kingdom that never was. The hammers never fell. In the timeline we know, the 1530s were defined by the sound of lead being stripped from abbey roofs and the shattering of medieval stained glass. But in this reality, the silence is profound. Because Catherine did not scream no from the courtroom floor, the machinery of the English Reformation stalled before it could ever grind to life. Henry VIII, a man driven by a volatile mix of desire and ego, found himself without a catalyst. Without Catherine's public defiance to frame as treason, his legal justification for breaking with Rome withered on the vine. The great matter, once a firestorm that threatened to consume the foundations of the church, became a mere footnote of failed diplomacy. Thomas Cromwell's radical blueprints for a state-controlled church gathered dust in a darkened drawer, for there was no political vacuum to fill.
Instead of ruins, the great monasteries of Glastonbury and Reading remained centers of learning and charity, their wealth flowing back into the community rather than the king's coffers. The Pope, relieved of the need to excommunicate his most powerful ally against the rising tide of Lutheranism, grants Henry the titles he craves without the price of his soul. In the halls of Whitehall, the Latin Mass continues to echo, unchanged and unchallenged. The English Reformation, that great schism that would have reshaped the Western world, is stifled in its cradle. England remains the jewel in the Catholic crown, not through force of arms, but through the devastating power of one woman's strategic silence. The dust of the great matter had settled, but in its place rose a monolith that would define the next century. With Catherine firmly seated as queen consort, the Tudor crown was no longer a lone island drifting toward the French coast. It was anchored. To the south, her nephew, Charles V, ruled an empire where the sun never set. To the north, Catherine's quiet persistence had transformed the English Channel into a Habsburg lake.
In the halls of Whitehall, the rustle of Spanish silk replaced the whispers of Anne Boleyn's faction. This was the Habsburg shield, a geopolitical iron curtain that stretched from the silver mines of Potosi to the bustling docks of London. Henry, once a king seeking to break chains, found himself gilded in imperial gold. The Anglo-Spanish alliance was no longer a marriage of convenience, it was a fusion of destinies. English archers and Spanish tercios now stood as a unified front, a wall of steel against any who dared challenge the cross. As bullion from the New World flowed into the king's coffers, the temptation of the Reformation withered. Why loot the monasteries when the treasures of the Americas were shared by right of blood? The alliance did not just protect the Queen, it protected the faith. London became a mirror to Madrid, a city of grand cathedrals and imperial ambition. The Tudor rose was still red, but its thorns were now forged in Spanish steel. In this new world order, England was not a rebel, but the favored jewel in the crown of a Catholic Europe, shielded by the might of the most powerful family history had ever known.
The fog of the Thames no longer carries the scent of damp wool and northern isolation. By the 1540s, the London air is thick with the fragrance of Spanish jasmine and the heavy, intoxicating musk of Seville's orange groves. Whitehall has been transformed. The rugged, timbered halls of the Plantagenets have yielded to the geometric elegance of the Escorial style, as England's cultural compass pivots decisively toward the Mediterranean. This is the Spanish Renaissance, a quiet, velvet conquest of the English heart. Catherine of Aragon, once a woman on the precipice of exile, is now the undisputed doyenne of European taste. It is her hand that guides the needle of English fashion. The court of King Henry VIII has discarded the flamboyant, chaotic furs of the French for the somber, imposing dignity of Spanish black velvet and stiff lace ruffs. Gold, plucked from the shimmering veins of the New World, flows through the city like a gilded river, financing the construction of cathedrals that rival the majesty of St. Peter's. In the royal galleries, the clatter of the English longbow is replaced by the intricate, rhythmic strumming of the vihuela.
Scholars from Salamanca walk the halls of Oxford, debating the harmony of faith and reason with English clerics, blending the two worlds into a singular intellectual powerhouse. Henry, ever the peacock, revels in this newfound sophistication. He is no longer a provincial king. He is the northern anchor of a global empire. By choosing the game, Catherine did more than save her marriage. She imported a civilization. The bells of Westminster did not toll for the funeral of a fragmented nation, but for the triumphant arrival of a queen whose path had been paved with silk, not steel. In this timeline, the long, dark shadow of the scaffold never touched the Lady Mary. She was no longer the bastardized daughter of a discarded queen, left to rot in the damp halls of Hunsdon. Instead, through Catherine's masterful and silent chess match, Mary Tudor remained the radiant centerpiece of the Habsburg-Tudor alliance.
The legal acrobatics that once threatened her very existence were buried beneath a mountain of Spanish gold and indisputable papal decrees.
Henry VIII, his volatile vanity fed by the global glory of a unified Catholic empire, looked upon his eldest daughter not with the bitter resentment of a man obsessed with a male heir, but with the booming pride of a monarch who had secured a permanent legacy. There were no desperate rebellions of the northern earls, no tragic 9-day reign for Lady Jane Grey, and no smoke rising from the pyres at Smithfield. Mary ascended the throne with the serene grace of a woman born to rule, her coronation a vibrant tapestry of Mediterranean splendor woven into the ancient fabric of English tradition. She was celebrated as the Pearl of the West, her legitimacy absolute, and her hand sought by every noble house in Christendom. Catherine of Aragon watched from the golden shadows of the palace, her ultimate work complete. She had not only saved her marriage, she had secured her daughter's crown and the religious soul of the kingdom. The succession was seamless, a quiet victory of diplomacy over the blade. The internal fires that once threatened to consume England have been extinguished, replaced by a singular, blinding light directed toward the east.
In this world, the English Channel is no longer a moat of isolation, but a bridge to the continent. With Mary Tudor firmly on the throne and the Habsburg alliance unshakable, the fragmented gaze of Christendom finally settles upon a common foe, the encroaching shadow of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine the Thames teeming not with the ships of civil war, but with galleons bearing the joint banners of the Tudor Rose and the Burgundian Cross. This is the Crusade of the West. While our history saw Europe fractured by the bloody schisms of the Reformation, this timeline sees a continent unified by Catherine of Aragon's tactical silence decades earlier. The wealth of the New World and the veteran naval might of the Old are poured into a singular holy objective, the total defense of the Mediterranean. At the gates of Malta and in the salt-sprayed waters of Lepanto, English sailors stand shoulder to shoulder with Spanish infantry. The Sultan's expansionism meets a wall of steel and faith that history once predicted would be broken by internal strife, yet here it remains ironclad. This is no longer a battle for a single crown, but for the soul of the West itself.
Queen Mary, the shield of the faith, fulfills her mother's most pious dream, turning her father's once wayward realm into the primary sword of the papacy. The crescent retreats before a united cross, and the Mediterranean becomes a secure Catholic lake, forged by the strategic patience of a Spanish princess. Imagine an Atlantic where the horizon is not a battleground, but a bridge. In this reality, the English sea dogs, the Drakes and Hawkinses of our history, never become pirates hunting Spanish bullion. Instead, they are the vanguard of a combined armada, the maritime muscle of a global Catholic monopoly. Under the joint Tudor-Habsburg expansion, the Treaty of Tordesillas is rewritten not with blood, but with the ink of a shared lineage. The map of the Americas transforms. There is no Virginia named for a virgin queen who never reigned. There is only New Aragon and the province of Mary. From the silver mines of Potosi to the fertile banks of the Hudson, the resources of two worlds flow into a single massive treasury. We see the docks of London transformed. The Thames is choked with galleons bearing the double-headed eagle and the Tudor Rose.
This is not the age of the privateer, but the era of the administrator. The indigenous peoples face a monolithic force, a unified front of steel and cross that allows no room for the colonial rivalries that once defined the era. As the 16th century wanes, the wealth of the New World doesn't just fund the Spanish crown, it fuels a London Renaissance of unprecedented scale. The English merchant class grows fat on the spoils of a peaceful Atlantic, while the Spanish infantry provides the boots on the ground in the dense jungles of the South. Together, they have locked the gates of the New World, ensuring that the sun never sets on a world that speaks with a single holy voice. Imagine a London where the bells of St. Paul's never ceased their Latin chants. In this alternate mid-16th century, the Tudor Rose remains deep crimson, unblemished by the white streaks of religious heresy. Catherine of Aragon, the silent architect of this enduring peace, watches from the hallowed halls of history as her daughter, Mary, ascends not as a bloody queen, but as the golden successor. Without the great matter to tear the kingdom asunder, the legitimacy of the crown is never questioned.
The court of London is a mirror of Madrid, pious, opulent, and unwavering. The great schism that defined the English identity in our world is entirely absent. There is no virgin queen defying a Spanish armada, because there is no armada. The Spanish fleet serves as a welcoming escort for English merchant vessels. Elizabeth, the daughter of a fallen favorite, exists as a loyal duchess rather than a revolutionary icon of a new faith. The radical shifts in theology that once fueled the fires of Smithfield and the gallows of Tyburn never ignite. Instead, we see a continuity of faith that anchors the British Isles firmly to the heart of Europe. The Tudor dynasty does not flicker out in the lonely, bitter chambers of Richmond Palace. It transforms into a multi-generational titan of stability. As the century wanes, England is not an isolated island fortress standing against the world. It is the northern pillar of a global Catholic empire. The Tudor name becomes synonymous not with rebellion, but with the ultimate endurance of the old order. The year is 1610, but the London skyline is not one of smoke and dissent. Instead, the spires of St.
Paul's reach toward the heavens, not as symbols of a fractured faith, but as terrestrial anchors for a celestial curiosity. Under the Catholic aegis, the Enlightenment has taken a different path. Here, science is not a rebel, but a devout child of the Church. Imagine the corridors of Oxford, where Jesuit influence has turned theology into a rigorous partner of the physical sciences. Without the bloody distractions of the Elizabethan era, the Tudor treasury, swelled by Spanish gold and American silver, funds the world's greatest observatories. We see an aging scholar peering through a lens crafted in Murano, his work sanctioned by a Vatican that never felt the need to retreat into defensive dogmatism. In this timeline, the heavens are viewed as a clockwork masterpiece, a divine mechanism that the Church encourages her children to understand. The printing presses, once tools of heretical pamphlets, now churn out intricate star charts and botanical journals from the New World. It is a golden age of intellectual stability.
By choosing the silent path of diplomacy over the roar of rebellion, Catherine of Aragon did more than save her marriage. She preserved the intellectual unity of the West. Knowledge flows across borders as easily as incense through a cathedral, proving that faith, when unchallenged by the sword, becomes the greatest patron of the mind. The light of reason does not flicker in the wind of heresy. It burns steady, fueled by the oil of ancient tradition. The year is 1547. In the drafty, candle-lit halls of Greenwich Palace, an old man stares at a map of a world that remained whole. Henry VIII, once the defiant lion of England, now breathes with a rattling weight, surrounded by the very icons he once threatened to shatter. He looks upon the gilded crosses and the portraits of a wife he could not break. Catherine of Aragon did not win through loud defiance or bloody rebellion. She won through the devastating power of strategic silence. By yielding to the nunnery, by stepping into the shadows when he expected a storm, she robbed him of the enemy he needed to fuel his fires. Her tactical acceptance became the cage in which his ego eventually withered.
While Henry sought to be the center of a new fractured universe, Catherine quietly ensured the old one endured, stronger and more unified than ever before. She did not merely survive the king, she curated him. As the Tudor line continues through Mary, untainted by the blood of a schism, the history books record a quiet truth. Henry may have worn the crown, but Catherine drew the borders of the soul. Her victory was not found in a throne reclaimed, but in the preservation of a civilization. She was the architect of silence, the woman who realized that the greatest way to defeat a tyrant's ego is to deny it a battle. In the quiet corridors of the Vatican and the busy ports of the New World, her legacy breathes, a world shaped not by a king's lust, but by a queen's restraint.